There's a certain kind of man who walks into a room and commands attention, not because he's loud, not because he's flashy, but because his presence speaks louder than any words ever could. This man doesn't beg for her time. He doesn't perform for her approval. He simply is, and that alone makes him unforgettable. So how do you become that man? A man who tries to dominate the room is often overcompensating for something he lacks internally, whether it's confidence, self, worth, or a sense of belonging. He speaks louder, gestures more, constantly seeks approval, and tries to insert himself into every conversation. But the truth is, none of that makes a lasting impression. It might get attention for a moment, but it's fleeting. Women, and people in general, can sense when someone is trying too hard. It's like an invisible signal that says, I need you to notice me because I don't notice myself. Now contrast that with the man who doesn't try to dominate the room, but instead controls his own energy. He's not performing, he's not seeking, he's just being. His posture is relaxed, not stiff. His eye contact is calm, not aggressive. His breathing is slow and measured. There's no tension in his body, because he doesn't need anything from anyone. That's what makes him powerful. He's not worried about what others think. He's tuned into his own frequency, and because of that, others begin to tune into him. Women are incredibly intuitive about this. They may not articulate it consciously, but they pick up on energy fast. They notice how a man carries himself when he walks into a space. They notice if he's reactive or composed, if he's fidgeting or grounded. And when they encounter a man who is deeply rooted in his own presence, who doesn't flinch in the face of silence, who doesn't jump to fill every gap with noise, they feel something different. It feels safe, solid, and undeniably masculine. That's the secret. You don't become unforgettable by trying to be loud. You become unforgettable by mastering your presence. When your energy is aligned, when your mood isn't easily shaken, when you walk into a room and your vibe speaks before you do. That's when she starts to wonder who you are. That's when you become the kind of man she watches without even realizing she's watching. Not because of what you're doing, but because of who you're being. Controlling your energy means knowing yourself, respecting yourself, and never letting external chaos disturb your inner peace. It means that whether you're standing in silence or walking past her without a word, your presence says, I don't need attention. I carry it with me. And that's something no one can imitate. You're not chasing her. You're chasing your mission. That single shift in focus changes everything. Not just how women see you, but how you see yourself. Most men have been conditioned to believe that winning a woman's affection is the ultimate goal. They pour their time, their attention, and their energy into impressing her, pleasing her, keeping her interested. But here's the problem with that. When you place a woman at the center of your life, you automatically remove yourself from it. You start revolving around her, instead of standing firmly in your own orbit. And no matter how much she may like the attention in the beginning, it eventually becomes suffocating. Because deep down, every woman knows, if a man has nothing bigger driving him, he will eventually lean on her to be his source of meaning, and that's a weight no one wants to carry. A man on a mission is different. He wakes up with intention. He doesn't need someone to remind him to work on himself, to stay disciplined, or to move forward, because his internal compass is already set. His goals aren't rooted in impressing others. They're rooted in becoming who he was meant to be. Whether it's building a business, mastering a craft, strengthening his mind and body, or serving a purpose that's bigger than himself, his energy is invested in progress. And when a man is progressing, he becomes magnetic. He's not available for petty arguments. He's not sitting by the phone wondering why she hasn't texted back. He's not chasing highs or escaping lows. He's working, building, sharpening. Women can feel this. They can sense when a man isn't trying to earn their validation because he already has his own. They feel it in the way he listens, not with an agenda, but with focus. They see it in the way he handles rejection, not with desperation, but with calm indifference. Because he knows his life doesn't start and stop based on her decisions. He's already moving forward with or without her. When you live for your mission, something powerful happens. You become emotionally independent. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop giving your power away just to feel liked. And without even trying, you start commanding respect. Not because you're asking for it, but because you're modeling it. She may admire your discipline, your focus, your ambition, but what really captures her is the fact that she's asterisk, not asterisk, the center of your world. That paradox is what pulls her in, because now your attention feels rare. Now your time means something. Now when you make space for her, it's not because you need to, but because you asterisk choose asterisk too. And that choice, that's where the value is. When a man has options, but he stays grounded in his path, he becomes someone no woman wants to lose. He's not chasing pleasure, validation, or attention. He's chasing growth, and in doing so, he becomes the type of man who elevates everyone around him, including her, without ever making her the focal point of his existence. That's what makes him unforgettable. Not what he says, not what he buys, not even what he does for her, but the unwavering clarity that he was built for something more, and he's not stopping until he gets there. Most men fear silence. They treat it like a void that needs to be filled, a space that demands noise, explanation, or entertainment. They talk just to talk, rambling, over-explaining, constantly trying to be interesting, funny, or clever. Why? Because silence exposes insecurity. In silence, there's no performance to hide behind. In silence, you are seen exactly as you are. That's terrifying for the average man. But for the grounded man, the evolved man, the man who truly knows himself, silence is power. There is an unspoken language that only few men understand, the ability to sit in absolute stillness and communicate confidence without uttering a single word. When you're not afraid of silence, you create a presence that is undeniable. You walk into a room and you don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to interrupt conversations or seek approval. You simply exist, and your energy fills the space. That's not arrogance. That's self-possession. And women feel it immediately. Silence makes people uncomfortable, especially those who aren't comfortable with themselves. But a man who is deeply secure in his identity doesn't need to fill that silence to feel validated. He's not itching to speak just to be heard. He speaks when he has something to say, and when he doesn't, he allows the moment to breathe. That restraint, that quiet confidence, that calm stillness, it draws people in. It creates intrigue. It leaves space for curiosity. And in a world full of noise and distraction, that kind of presence becomes magnetic. When you're sitting across from a woman and you're fully present, not checking your phone, not nervously talking about your job or your past relationships, but simply being there, relaxed, steady, aware, she feels that. She notices the difference. You're not trying to entertain her. You're not trying to prove anything. You're simply being asterisk, and that beingness is louder than any scripted line you could deliver. It tells her, without saying a word, that you are enough as you are. No show needed, No approval required. Even in conflict, the power of silence separates the grounded man from the reactive boy. Most men explode when they feel disrespected or ignored. They rush to defend their ego, raise their voice, or argue just to win. But the man who masters silence doesn't flinch. He lets the noise pass. He observes, he listens, he waits. And when he does speak, every word lands with weight, because it wasn't thrown out of impulse. It was chosen with intent. That calm demeanor shows emotional maturity. It shows that you don't let the world dictate your internal state, and that makes you unshakable. The power of silence also translates to restraint in action. You don't always react when she pulls back. You don't blow up her phone when she gets distant. You don't chase when things get quiet. You let the silence do the talking. You let your absence teach her what your presence meant. That space you allow communicates volumes. It tells her, I'm not desperate. I don't fear loss. I respect myself too much to beg. That level of emotional control isn't common, and that's exactly why it's so attractive. A man who is comfortable in silence has mastered the art of tension. He doesn't fear it, he embraces it. Whether it's the tension of a long pause, the silence after a deep eye contact, or the quiet after a difficult truth, he holds it. He doesn't rush to escape it. He knows that growth, clarity, and connection often come from the things left unspoken. And by holding that space, he invites a woman into something deeper, something more real. Most men seek connection through constant expression, but the rare man, the unforgettable one, creates connection through presence, and presence requires silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. That stillness communicates a message that words never could. I am here, I am whole, and I need nothing from you to feel complete. That is the language of masculine energy at its peak. That is the kind of silence that lingers long after you've left the room. You don't have to say, I'm here for you. When you're truly grounded in your presence, she can feel it without you having to utter a single word. Emotional safety isn't something you proclaim, it's something you embody. And the men who understand this don't try to convince a woman they're safe. They simply show up with such consistency, calmness, and inner control that she naturally lets her guard down in their presence. It's not about being overly affectionate or emotionally available at every moment. It's about being emotionally steady, so much so that she senses you won't collapse under pressure or become a storm when things get uncomfortable. What makes a man emotionally safe isn't his softness, it's his stability, it's his ability to be non-reactive. It's the way he listens without instantly needing to fix. It's the way he holds space when she's emotional without rushing to invalidate or control her feelings. Most men can't do this. They get uncomfortable when a woman expresses something real. They try to shut it down, change the subject, or give shallow advice. But the man who simply allows her to feel, who can stay in the moment without taking things personally, without being shaken, he becomes rare. And in that rarity, he becomes unforgettable. Emotional safety does not mean being passive or weak. In fact, it requires incredible strength. It means you've done enough work on yourself that her chaos doesn't awaken your own. It means you don't flinch when she tests you, when she tries to poke holes in your armor to see if you're really as solid as you appear. And make no mistake, she will test you, not out of malice, but out of instinct. She wants to know, can I lean on you? Are you really grounded, or is it all a front? The man who folds, who becomes defensive, who raises his voice or shuts down, he reveals his fragility. But the man who remains calm, centered, unbothered by emotional turbulence, he reveals his depth. He proves that his peace isn't conditional, That's the kind of man a woman can trust. Women want to feel emotionally free around a man. They want to be able to express without being judged, to open up without fearing that it'll be used against them later. But that kind of freedom only emerges when the man in front of her is not insecure, when he's not trying to win points or manipulate outcomes, when he doesn't get easily offended or take everything as a personal attack. She needs to feel that she can be soft without him becoming hard in response, that she can be vulnerable without him withdrawing or trying to fix her. What you have to understand is this: you're not safe just because you say you are. You're safe because you prove it, moment by moment, in how you react to her emotions. And this has nothing to do with being a people pleaser or constantly catering to her. On the contrary, sometimes the greatest emotional safety a man can provide is his refusal to be pulled into unnecessary drama. It's his willingness to set firm boundaries with grace. It's his ability to say no without guilt, because that shows her that he's not afraid to protect his own peace, which in turn tells her he'll protect the peace between them. You also don't have to explain your emotional intelligence. A woman knows when a man has done the inner work. She knows when he's emotionally literate, when he understands his own triggers and can hold space without dumping his issues onto her. When a man brings that kind of maturity into a connection, it changes everything. She no longer feels like she has to guide the emotional dynamic. She can relax. She can stop being in her masculine energy, stop being the emotional container, and start being herself. And ironically, that's where true intimacy begins, not through long conversations about feelings, but through the safety created by emotional responsibility. When you can show up fully, without needing her to manage your moods, without needing her to soothe your ego, you give her the freedom to be feminine, and that feminine energy only flows when it feels protected. Not through words, not through grand gestures, but through presence, through the kind of presence that doesn't react, doesn't collapse, and doesn't flinch. Emotional safety without chasing validation is about being strong in your silence, calm in your storms, and grounded even when the ground seems to shake. It's about showing her that you are a man who doesn't just hear her, but who truly sees her without needing to control, fix, or manipulate her experience. And in that space, where she feels fully seen yet totally free, you become something more than a partner. You become a sanctuary. A man who truly knows his worth never needs to announce it. He doesn't walk into a room trying to prove that he's valuable, desirable, or important. He simply moves through life in a way that makes it obvious. This kind of self-worth isn't loud or performative. It's subtle, steady, and unshakable. It's reflected in the decisions he makes, the standards he holds, and the energy he refuses to tolerate. And perhaps most importantly, it's revealed in what he chooses to walk away from, not just what he chooses to pursue. Because the truth is, the most valuable men are not the ones who seek attention. They are the ones who command it by not needing it. When a man has done the inner work to understand his value, his time becomes sacred. His energy becomes selective. He doesn't entertain meaningless connections just to feel wanted. He doesn't waste hours texting someone who gives him breadcrumbs of attention. He doesn't overextend himself just to win temporary approval. Why? Because he knows he is the prize. He doesn't just say it. He lives it. His calendar reflects it. His boundaries reflect it. His relationships reflect it. He's not driven by scarcity. He's grounded in abundance, and that's what makes him powerful. This kind of man doesn't chase validation because he already validates himself. He doesn't look to a woman to make him feel whole or to confirm his masculinity. His sense of self isn't built on how attractive she finds him, how much attention she gives, or how often she responds to his messages. He's not measuring his worth based on her behavior. Instead, he's already rooted in a deep internal knowing. I bring value wherever I go. Whether she sees it or not doesn't change the truth of who I am. Women notice this instantly. They sense when a man isn't trying to impress, but simply expresses who he is without apology. They feel the difference between a man who wants to be chosen and a man who chooses himself first. And ironically, the men who are least concerned with being needed often become the most desired, because their value is felt, not explained. Their confidence is shown in their restraint, in their ability to say no, in their unwillingness to settle for less than they deserve. A man with self-worth also doesn't argue with disrespect. He doesn't engage in toxic dynamics. He doesn't try to win back someone who's indifferent, and he doesn't tolerate games. He knows that every time he chooses peace over drama, he reinforces his own value. Every time he walks away from something that doesn't serve him, he strengthens his self-respect. And every time he invests in his growth rather than seeking attention, he becomes more magnetic. Not because he's trying to be, but because he's focused on becoming more of who he already is. And this kind of man doesn't need to tell a woman, "You'll miss me when I'm gone." She will feel it on her own, because he's not the type of man you easily replace. He's not transactional, he's transformational. He doesn't just provide company, he elevates the environment he's in. He doesn't just listen, he understands. He doesn't just show up, he shows up with presence, purpose, and integrity. And once a woman experiences that kind of energy, every other man who lacks it starts to feel empty by comparison. He's also not obsessed with being understood. He understands that some people will overlook him simply because they're not ready to receive the type of energy he brings. That's fine. He's not for everyone. He doesn't dilute himself to become more digestible. He doesn't shrink his standards to avoid being alone. He knows that solitude isn't a punishment, it's a refining process. And during that process, he becomes sharper, more focused, and more aligned with his true self. So when he does show up in a relationship, he's not showing up half-built. He's already done the work. This kind of self-worth is rare, and that's why it's unforgettable. When a man operates at that level of internal certainty, he becomes an emotional benchmark. And not just someone a woman remembers, but someone she compares others to. He raises the bar without trying. He inspires reflection without speaking. And he teaches, through his mere existence, what it means to value yourself so deeply that you don't need to be seen to be significant. You already know you are. There's a presence about a man who moves with intention, a stillness, a weight. He's not easily swayed, not easily pulled into distractions, and certainly not living for momentary highs. He's focused, and that focus radiates from him without him needing to advertise it. He knows where he's going, he knows what he's building, and more importantly, he knows who he is. This kind of man doesn't drift through life hoping for something to happen. He creates movement through discipline. He doesn't waste energy explaining his plans or trying to make others understand the depth of his vision. He just works quietly, relentlessly, day after day, and in a world full of chaos, that kind of steady direction is rare and undeniably attractive. Intentional living isn't just about having goals. It's about aligning your actions, your habits, and your mindset with a clear vision of the man you're becoming. It means you're not waking up each day just reacting to what comes your way. You're not floating in the current, you're steering the ship. Every choice you make, from how you spend your mornings to who you give your time to, reflects a deeper purpose. There's no energy wasted on proving your worth to anyone, because you're not chasing a woman, a lifestyle, or even success for validation. You're locked into a mission that's bigger than ego, and that mission gives you direction, even on the days when motivation fades. This level of focus changes how you carry yourself. You no longer rush conversations just to fill the space. You speak with precision because your mind is already working through bigger ideas. You don't react emotionally to every little inconvenience. You remain calm, composed, and deliberate. People start to notice that you're not always available, not because you're playing games, but because you're genuinely busy building something meaningful. That absence becomes powerful. That distance becomes desirable. You're not trying to be mysterious. It just happens as a byproduct of your dedication to your own path. Women are drawn to men with direction, not because of what they're doing, but because of the energy that direction creates. A man who is deeply immersed in his craft or purpose becomes captivating without effort. He doesn't need to flatter, chase, or constantly initiate. His focus is a gravitational force. She feels it when she's around him. She feels it in how he makes decisions, how he responds under pressure, and how he holds his boundaries. He's not trying to manage her perception of him. He's too busy managing his own evolution. That's the kind of focus that can't be faked. It's lived, it's earned, and it speaks louder than words ever could. When you move with intention, your life naturally filters out what doesn't align. You stop entertaining relationships that drain you. You stop tolerating conversations that go nowhere. You stop chasing people who can't meet you where you are, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Your time becomes sacred. Your space becomes selective. You don't need to explain why you're unavailable for anything less than excellence. You show it by what you allow. That quiet discipline becomes your shield, and over time it builds a reputation that speaks on your behalf. Even when you're silent, even when you're alone, your focus builds presence. You don't need to post every win. You don't need to tell everyone what you're working on. Your results speak for you. And women notice when a man has that kind of alignment, when everything he does, from the way he walks to the way he prioritizes his day, reflects intentional growth. It shows them that he's not looking for someone to complete him. He's looking for someone who can walk beside him without slowing him down, and that kind of man, he's not easily replaced. There's a quiet strength in being a man who stays rooted in his direction. He doesn't collapse when he's misunderstood. He doesn't lose himself in relationships. He doesn't compromise his standards to avoid being alone. He trusts the process. He respects the grind. He honors the path. And by doing so, he becomes the kind of man whose absence creates a void. Not because he tried to be unforgettable, but because the energy he brought was never dependent on validation. It came from within. That internal fire, that unshakable commitment to his mission, is what leaves a lasting impression, long after the conversation ends, long after the connection fades, and long after she realizes that men like him don't come around twice. So, in the end, becoming the man she can't replace isn't about what you say. It's about who you are when you say nothing at all. It's about your energy, your discipline, your presence, and the standard you hold for yourself. It's the way you protect your peace, the way you move with purpose, the way you remain grounded when others are reactive. When you become that man, not to impress, not to be chosen, but because that's who you've chosen to be, she won't just notice. She'll feel it, and once she experiences a man who embodies that level of presence and power without ever having to prove it, no one else will ever compare.